Hey guys, so just before we begin, I want to remind you that I am offering coaching, and so if you're interested in deepening your personal or spiritual development, feel free to click the link in the description and you can book a free discovery call with me. Otherwise, let's jump into the video. So today what I want to talk about are the purifying benefits of quitting casual relationships and also moving towards a path of Brahmacharya. Now I'm going to loosely define Brahmacharya for us as living in such a way that brings out the God in you. And this is mostly through transmuting your sexual energy, overcoming lust, having a spiritual attitude towards the other gender, and living a life with full awareness. So that's roughly what we're aiming for. But what else do we need to consider here when it comes to quitting casual relationships? Well, what comes up for me, which I'd like to share, is that there isn't actually anything wrong with having casual relationships in the first place. The chances are you're going to need to have them and actually burn through them so that you can be ready to move on from them in a way that is genuine and not forced. And honestly, this can be really damn hard because as you're doing this, you may find that part of you, just wants to transcend them as soon as possible. And I feel this, I've been there myself. However, one of the realities that we've got to face on this path is that as human beings, we do have sexual desire. And as a person, you're going to have a certain level of sexual karma that you need to burn through, basically so that you can evolve and move towards transcending desire, but without having loads of resistance or repressed desires come up for you. Right? You want to be mentally, physically, and spiritually done with many of the lower sexual activities, at least to a good extent, before you can get to a point where you can very organically say, yeah, I'm ready to start moving towards Brahmacharya, which again, it doesn't have to mean, total celibacy. Obviously it can be, but how I'm presenting it here is simply to place God, the universe, or higher consciousness before your lower desire. So now that we've covered that, let's jump into the benefits. The first benefit of quitting casual sex and relationships is your perception of sex can transform. And it can actually flourish into something that is sacred. And for me personally, when I started to have this, I found it deeply, deeply satisfying. Because what can happen is you can genuinely start to see the opposite sex in a purer and more spiritual light. Right? It means you can genuinely shift from seeing sex as a way of, relieving your urges or to get dopamine hits into a more divine activity, which feels so much more correct, so much more aligned with your deeper feelings about what is good for you. And so if you're wondering, how this happens, I find it tends to happen if you take some time for yourself, to really be alone, really be with yourself. And as you do this, you'll probably find that some space opens up within you. And if you can manage to remain very, very pure in this space and not fill it with stuff, like sexual thoughts or social conditioning, loads of ideas, you can start to have this subtle internal shift and begin to have what I'm going to call a higher perception of sex. And what I'm talking about here, interestingly, is not some new idea or even thinking differently per se. Rather, it's a very subtle shift that happens within you where you become more conscious that sex is something that is deeply, deeply sacred and not something that you can be unconscious or disconnected during. So in other words, after you embrace purity and, contemplate this stuff more and more, you start to see and feel this possibility that a sexual relationship can actually be divine. And in terms of what this may lead you to do, you may move towards something like Karezza, which is a way of being intimate with someone where you don't release your energy. Or it could be you having some dedicated time for yourself, to really respect this truth that you've learned and to actually become celibate for a period of time. And that can lead to a greater connection with God and a deeper connection with yourself. But of course, if you're awakening, you would know that these two things, they're one. Right? The closer you are with God is actually the closer you are to yourself. And that's not an idea we have, by the way. It's a reality that we get in touch with every single time we do our spiritual practice, like our meditation, our yoga, and anything else that raises our consciousness. So to summarize this one, living with Brahmacharya in your heart basically gives you enough time and space away from lust for you to start connecting the dots and for you to start having these perception shifts that really upgrade the way that you see sex and relationships. The next purifying benefit that we can talk about, and this is an interesting one, is a decrease in what I'm going to call void or void activities. Now, by this, I'm talking about pleasurable activities that dampen the soul, but that we try and use to fill this infinite void within us. Now, what do we do as humans? Well, we try to fill this void anyway, even though it's infinite, and even though these pleasurable experiences are limited to our nervous system. Now, why do we do this? Well, the truth is, it's because we are deeply spiritually confused, right? We need to raise our level of consciousness so that we can see things clearly again. So, jumping back to the void, casual sex becomes attractive to us because it provides us with this very stimulating physical pleasure that we can use to almost numb ourselves with, right? However, as you know, the more that you try and fill this void with pleasurable activities, the bigger it gets, and the more it tries to pull you in. And so where things begin to change for us is when we do our work with Brahmacharya and we purify ourselves and the way we live our lives. And so when we do this kind of work, we very mindfully turn away, walk away, and relinquish these things like casual sex. Because again, they dampen the soul. And the soul, or our spiritual connection, is all we really got when it comes down to it, when it comes down to what's guiding us and what's leading us towards peace and truth. Another great thing about this decision is that it really does boost you in other areas of life. Right? Lust, you'll see, it's a drainer, right? Whereas purity is a booster. And it will boost you towards all the things that you want to pursue, but have lacked the courage, grit, and personal power to even try. Likewise, to bring in Swami Shivananda here, he would say that restraint of the sex urge, it leads to restraint of other impulses. And so essentially, as you take care of this one thing, this sex desire, which by the way, is a very big thing, you also take care of the rest of your life. And for me, that's deeply powerful. The next purifying benefit that I want to share is an increase in Ojas Shakti. Now, this energy, if you didn't know, is actually described in Brahmacharya as the basis for health and vitality. So when you have good Ojas, not only are you physically well, but you are spiritually well also. And when you are spiritually well, I would suggest that you have one of the most holistic experiences of health that you can possibly have, because you can feel on this very subtle level that all parts of you are connected and are being infused with this life force that is just glowing, right? And you can feel how this glow has this very significant effect on pretty much every single cell in your body and every single thought that comes into your consciousness. So your health transforms, but not just physically, spiritually too. And likewise, having high Ojas will just attract more of the right people in your life, right? Because you'll just be a happier person. That's just what happens. And you'll be putting out better energy. And as you know, when you're putting out better energy, you're also going to be attracting that back in your own life. And so this does purify you in the sense that it allows you to pursue and form these more organic relationships that are more authentic and that are more genuine. And that really makes a difference. So, to wrap this one up, I want you to remember the following thing. Casual relationships are karma that you may need to burn through whilst you're on this spiritual path. Don't blame yourself if you need to work through them for a while, because you do need to make sure that you are ready to start, evolving and letting go of lots of lust and desire. Otherwise, be very open to the possibility of Brahmacharya in your life. Now, you might not be ready completely now, but in 3 or 4 years, especially if you start awakening more, and seeing the universe more in yourself and other people, you'll probably be more inclined to have a higher consciousness approach to life. And Brahmacharya, it's a really solid way of going about that. So, that's it for me. If you've enjoyed this one and you would like more, then my friend, please do subscribe.